Sensational. Zelensky is ready to step down as president after the war and is prepared for elections during a ceasefire. The Ukrainian armed forces are preparing a major offensive at the front. Trump has already been briefed and he's thrilled. You have to see this. Another attack on Crimea. 2 Russian planes were burned there. Russian drones have once again been spotted in Danish airspace and planes have approached Alaska. The US is scrambling its aircraft. A powerful attack on the port in Tuapse. Russia's oil export terminal is on fire. Poland is ready to shoot down Russian drones over Ukraine without NATO's permission. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dimitrovskaya. Right now, the main news. Let's begin. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. I will step down as soon as the war is over. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated in a new interview that he is ready to leave his post as head of state. If
we end the war with the Russians, yes, I am ready not to run, not to stand for president again, because elections are not my goal. I really wanted to be with my country, to help it through a very difficult period. That's what I wanted. My goal is to end the war.
Along with this, Zelensky says that elections can be held when there is a ceasefire. And what do you think? Will Zelensky run for president a second time? Let's hold a sort of referendum among our international audience. Like this video if you think Zelensky should run for a second term. And if you think he should step down after the war, write it in the comments. But let's get back to other statements from the president of Ukraine. In addition, Zelensky stated that Russian officials must either end the war or find a bomb shelter.
They need to know where the bomb shelters are. They need this. If they don't stop the war, they'll need it anyway. They need to know that here in Ukraine, we will respond every day.
Meanwhile, according to Zelensky, Trump has already given the green light for strikes on Russia in response if the Kremlin attacks Ukrainian energy infrastructure again. Zelensky's statement was met with a response from Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, who called Zelensky a freak and claimed that Russia could use weapons against which bomb shelters would be useless. And Americans should keep that in mind. The closing of the beach season in Tuapse was quite an event. Ukrainian sea drones attacked Russian resorts and at the same time the port for several hours in a row. Local telegram channels reported that explosions and bursts of automatic gunfire were heard in the city.
Here we are, just lying here. A bullet is flying over my head. Right above my head. What a party. Someone got hit, someone screamed, someone was wounded. Well, he's yelling over there. They got him. They got him. As a result,
monitoring channels report Ukrainian sea drones targeted the port infrastructure. The miss landed on the Rosneft oil loading pier. They ship out mazout, vacuum gas oil, Limni diesel there, and the main importers are Turkey, China, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. Bloomberg reports that this is likely the first recorded strike on Russian oil export infrastructure at Black Sea ports. And the Russians are so surprised that they stopped loading oil.
2 key oil ports on the Russian Black Sea coast have suspended tanker loading after overnight warnings of drone attacks, which is yet another sign of how Ukraine is destroying the energy infrastructure of its enemies.
In addition, people were evacuated from beaches in Sochi and Tuapse, and in Gelendzhik, all vessels were banned from going out to sea. And once again, it was very loud on the night of September 25th in Belorechensк, Krasnodar Krai. Local social media pages report a strike on the plant producing phosphorus and mineral fertilizers, as well as nitrogen compounds, Eurochem Belorechensк fertilizers. In temporarily occupied Crimea, GUR special forces destroyed 2 Russian military transport aircraft, AN-26s. In addition, during the raid on the peninsula, the Primara unit struck an expensive radar station for surface installations and a coastal MSM-1 radar. What is happening on the front around it at this very moment is covered in our military review.
2 fighters from the Skala regiment catch 8 occupiers by surprise as they enter the village of Novotroitske in the Pokrovsk district of Donetsk region. The first 3 Russian soldiers were eliminated immediately by the Ukrainian fighters as soon as they approached the ambush, and the rest were destroyed using a grenade launcher and drones. The Pokrovsk direction remains the hottest spot on the front. A third of all clashes and assaults on the front line occur precisely in the Pokrovsk direction. Despite such intensity, all attacks have been unsuccessful. The occupiers are willing to do anything to achieve their objectives. In the Pokrovsk direction, a drone recorded Russian soldiers shooting a family of civilians and taking a girl hostage. The child was used as a human shield to cover the assault groups. Russian sources acknowledge that the Ukrainian armed forces are repelling all attacks by the Russian army and are successfully conducting counter-offensive actions to push the occupiers away from Pokrovsk.
In the Pokrovsk direction, the enemy has concentrated its efforts on breaking through towards Novotoretske. Footage has surfaced of a firefight between the enemy and our forces in the village. The enemy is trying to cut off our salient. The situation has been characterized by optimistic reports from the field for more than a week now, including regarding control over previously captured villages.
To advance, the Kremlin is transferring reserves to the Pokrovsky direction from the northern Kharkiv region, as well as units that participated in the Zapad 2025 exercises in Belarus.
The enemy is trying to use its numerical and technical superiority to achieve a number of its ambitions. The ambitions are quite serious. The enemy is literally dreaming of taking full control of both Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, advancing through parts of Dnipropetrovsk region and parts of Zaporizhzhia region in the direction of Huliaipol.
In the Zaporizhzhia region, near the village of Stepnohirsk, Russian soldiers tried to probe for a weak spot in the defense, but Vysohuboytsi and Vairi units immediately thwarted this attempt, and the enemy fighters were eliminated. Thanks to their numerical superiority in infantry, the enemy is constantly looking for breakthrough options in the Zaporizhzhia region.
The greatest number of attempted advances remain in the area of Plavny through Primorsk, where enemy groups are constantly being detected and targeted. From there, they either try to push deeper into Primorsk or attempt to infiltrate Stepnohirsk. In particular, yesterday a small group of enemy troops managed to slip into the western outskirts of the settlement, but they were eliminated by Defense Forces fighters. At the same time, there are periodic detections east of Stepnohirsk, where the enemy seems to be probing the area for weak spots in the defense and looking for a gap to exploit for a deeper incursion, but so far without success thanks to the effective work of Ukrainian pilots.
Unfortunately, these attempts are sometimes successful. In the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, the Russian army has occupied Nova Nikolaivka and Nova Ivanivka and has also advanced near Kalinivske, Ternove and Nova Ivanivka. Such active assault operations are accompanied by enormous losses in personnel. This 21-year-old liberator, who lost an arm and a leg, was actually lucky. He waited for evacuation from the battlefield for just a week and a half.
11 long days, without any food, without any water at all.
It's a vivid lesson for those from Tikoretsk who are planning to go to Ukraine for the so-called special military operation. This is exactly how the Kremlin cares for its soldiers, using them as cannon fodder and then simply forgetting about them.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a massive horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the Ukrainian armed forces. If you can't do so financially, write words of encouragement in the comments, knowing that they are watching us. Remember Trump's words about how Ukraine is very successfully stopping the powerful Russian army. With a change in rhetoric and support, Ukraine will have the opportunity to return to its 1991 borders. So it wasn't just the recent achievements of the Ukrainian armed forces that influenced the US president, but also the statements made by President Zelensky.
Today, our servicemen have deoccupied 360 square kilometers and have not lost more than 1,000 soldiers. Of course, we will strive to exchange them for our own soldiers, but thanks to our servicemen, we have this opportunity. And of course, we will continue until Russia stops this war.
In addition, the plan for the future offensive of the Ukrainian armed forces also made an impression on Trump, which, according to the Wall Street Journal, absolutely charmed the American leader.
Trump was informed about the planned counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces. It will require support from the United States, but only in the area of intelligence. This is important because, according to officials from the United States of America, Trump has changed his rhetoric, but not his policy.
It's interesting to wonder what the Ukrainian armed forces are planning, but we're sure it will be even more interesting to see the results of our defense forces' work. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many people are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We, Ukrainians, are very grateful to you for your support and proud that we have such a reasonable audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well where you're watching us from and whether people in your country support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, let's move on to the most interesting part. It seems that in the Kremlin, they have decided not just to test the red lines, but are already starting to shift them quite abruptly. For the second time in a week, Denmark has closed its airport due to unidentified drones in its airspace. On the night of September 25th, several drones were detected over Aalborg Airport, which is used for both commercial and military flights. According to local media, they also flew right over the airbase in Skrydstrup, where F-16 and F-35 aircraft are parked. Drones were also detected in the areas of Esbjerg and Sønderborg airports. And again, this shows that the Kremlin's provocations are becoming increasingly intense. Unknown aircraft, likely Russian, approached Alaskan airspace. The United States was forced to scramble an E-3 long-range radar surveillance aircraft, a KC-135 tanker, and several fighter jets to track the actions of the presumed Russian planes. In my opinion, the Kremlin is, so to speak, testing the waters to see how people react to provocations, and as soon as there is no appropriate response, there isn't one, Moscow prepares a new provocation, thereby shifting the so-called red lines. And what do you think these Kremlin provocations might be about? Poland is preparing to shoot down Russian drones over Ukraine without the consent of NATO or the EU. According to Euroctiv, the country is preparing to amend its law on the deployment of military forces abroad, and the draft proposal introduced in June is expected to be considered on a fast-track basis.
Originally, the law allowed the president to authorize the deployment of troops at the request of the government in cases such as armed conflict, peacekeeping, counterterrorism, or evacuation. But in 2022, a day before Russia's full-scale invasion, the Law and Justice Party government amended it, requiring approval from NATO, the EU, and the country where Polish troops would be deployed.
At the time, the commission investigating Russian influence later criticized this decision as it deprived Warsaw of the right to act independently against drones crossing the border from Ukraine or Belarus. The current ruling coalition, however, plans to lift these restrictions and act on the principle of shooting first and asking questions later. This will give the military greater flexibility in responding to threats. Personally, I support such a decision. The only question is why only now, when, in my opinion, Russia is actively working to shift the so-called red lines. But as they say, better late than never.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Putin has granted Russian citizenship to Tara Reade. She is a former aide to Joe Biden who has accused him of sexual misconduct. What purpose does the dictator have in keeping this notorious woman with him? More on that in the following report. Joe?
Biden didn't ask me if I wanted to. Just like he didn't ask you if you wanted to get involved in the war between Ukraine and Russia, because it's all a money laundering scheme.
The Russian dictator Putin granted Russian citizenship to Joe Biden's former aide, Tara Reade. It is worth noting that to obtain a Russian passport, one must legally reside in the country for at least 5 years.
It was a truly special day. Now I am a citizen of Russia. What an honor. Thank you to President Putin for this, and thank you to Maria Butina, who was with me and helped me on this path to safety. Thank you to Margarita Simonian, who supported me and helped me apply for citizenship, and to Russia Today. I am so proud to work at Russia Today. I am lucky.
Who is this Tara Reade and how did she end up in Russia? She is an American publicist and activist, but Tara Reade became known not because of her articles, but after she spoke out about working as an assistant in Biden's office in the early 1990s when he was a senator. In 2020, while her former boss Biden was finishing his run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, Reade suddenly filed a report of sexual assault without naming the perpetrator.
He put his hands on my shoulders and started stroking my hair.
Later, she told journalists that it was Biden who sexually assaulted her one day in a corridor of the US Congress in 1993 when he was a senator and she worked for him.
He pinned me against the wall and touched me there with his hands. It wasn't just harassment, he wanted to assert his dominance.
What you are telling me sounds much more like a serious case of rape than mere harassment.
It only happened once when we were alone together. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Biden's campaign denied the accusations and no official charges were ever brought against him. When I spoke about
the sexual assault by Joe Biden in the US, I faced threats. I hope there will be an investigation into this case and I want to testify at it. I am ready to testify under oath that I was raped by Joe Biden.
Reade claimed that after making her accusations, she lost everything, including her job.
He took away my future. I didn't want to be a senator's mistress. I wanted to become a senator myself.
After that, Tara decided to publish an autobiographical book, Left Behind When the Truth Doesn't Fit.
I'm not staying silent, and you shouldn't either, dear Americans. I won't be intimidated.
According to American media, back in 1998, Reade changed her name to Alexandra McCabe to protect herself from her husband, whom she also accused of abuse. After ending her political career, Tara Reade testified in court as a domestic violence expert and hosted a radio show. Even then, Tara Reade published her own political articles in which she expressed sympathies toward Russia. And in 2023, she makes her biggest move, leaving for the Russian Federation. At the time, the supposed reason was that she did not feel safe in the United States, even though Biden had already been in power for 3 years.
The proxy war that NATO is waging against Russia using Ukraine's hands is being funded by someone, and both Democrats and Republicans want to get that money back for themselves.
She was welcomed in Russia with bread and salt.
The US has burned all bridges with Russia. It is necessary to work on restoring them so that Russian diplomats can start trusting Americans again.
She openly spoke out against supporting Ukraine and dreamed of being granted Russian citizenship.
Moving to Russia was a forced step for me, but then I fell so in love with it that now I want to stay. Upon arrival, I had to seek political asylum so that I could speak my mind. I know that my choice was not appreciated by the American authorities. Now I realize that my return could become problematic.
For the past 2 years, Tara has worked at the most propagandistic channel, Russia Today, together with Margarita Simonian, whose resemblance to her is obvious to the naked eye.
The entire Democratic Party consists of bad people. The problem isn't just Biden. They all want the war to continue.
At one of the press conferences in Russia, Reade appeared next to Maria Butina, who was arrested in the US in 2018 for collaborating with Russian intelligence and sentenced to 18 months in prison.
Tara asked me for asylum. She told me her story, how she was threatened, how they wanted to kill her, and we Russians don't abandon our own. She will learn the language. She wants to know more about Russian culture and people. I will ask Putin to help her.
Putin needs people like Tara Reade. He took her under his wing. An American woman who has given herself over to the Russian world to her very core. She is ready to accuse the West, praise Russia, and help the Kremlin in every possible way. Russia Today is there to support her. In response, Tara Reade promised that she would be a good citizen of the Russian Federation. I want
to get a Russian passport, but I also want to keep my American citizenship. I also want to thank you, my brothers and sisters from Russia. For what? For welcoming me so warmly?
Tanks have hit the ceiling. Since 2022, military enterprises in Russia have reduced hiring to a minimum. And for the first time since the invasion, salaries in the defense industry have dropped. All of this points to colossal problems in the Russian military-industrial complex. Here are the details.
Russian tanks are on the verge of extinction. It seems the Russian military-industrial complex can't cope, and soon there may be nothing left to fight with at all. And apparently sanctions are to blame for this.
Sanctions are a very significant and substantial part of the overall situation. But after all, these are indeed continuous streams. These are truly flowing streams that are constantly moving. It seems
the stability of Russia's economy, as Putin claims, is starting to show a noticeable crack.
Sooner or later, the inevitable overheating of the military economy may not necessarily lead to its complete collapse, but rather to a very sharp and significant decline. The general economic trends in the Russian Federation will also affect the military sectors of the economy.
It would seem that for the first time since 2022, salaries have started to fall at Russia's most important enterprises. And yes, we're talking about companies in the military-industrial complex.
Undoubtedly, lending to enterprises in the military-industrial complex has an impact. This played a positive role, but now it's starting to have a negative effect, having essentially reached its peak, or a plateau, or a thick plateau. But
how do staffing shortages and economic problems then affect the expansion of Russia's military-industrial complex?
The ability of the Russian economy to supply the army, to supply the war with equipment and ammunition. These capabilities are not limitless either, especially when it comes to rapid expansion, but the modern Russian economy can reach Soviet-era levels, Soviet-era indicators.
Of course, sanctions are no joke, especially when they affect the condition and quality of your military equipment, or may even halt its new production altogether. But that's where Soviet-era tanks come to the rescue.
The primary focus subsequently shifted towards the extensive restoration of older, existing Soviet-era military equipment from various storage facilities, specifically restoring it to operational status, rearming it with necessary weaponry, and once again thoroughly refurbishing and meticulously preparing it for immediate combat readiness. However,
the time has already come when old equipment doesn't make the job easier, but on the contrary, makes it more difficult.
There are fewer and fewer repairable units, so they have to fix what's not really repairable, cobble things together, and assemble from several units. This requires much more effort, work, and so on.
Thus, instead of producing new and modern equipment, Russia is increasingly using old and worn-out machinery.
The production of new equipment is hindered by sanctions, among other things, as well as by the unpreparedness of the manufacturing base. That's why the ramp-up in the production of modern types of weaponry is nowhere near the pace Russia needs to make up for its losses on the battlefield. So they prefer to fund what will deliver results here and now, rather than tomorrow or the day after.
Let's not forget about Putin's loyal friends, China and Iran, who are actually helping them a great deal.
We have always been together, so we remain together now as well.
But any delivery is more a way for Beijing to keep Moscow on a short leash.
But in
the end, what do we have as of today? It is known that in 2024, the military industry of the Russian Federation reached the limits of its capabilities. But what are Russia's prospects now? The only question is how long the Kremlin will be able to maintain this level, and whether it will turn out that the unexpected blow comes not from the front, but from within.
The more the high-ranking generals and the influential icebreakers of the Russian economy and its vast military-industrial complex continue to illicitly accumulate wealth and systematically steal resources, the progressively less chance they will ultimately have of successfully maintaining their current advantageous position at this precarious plateau, facing inevitable decline.
But of course, sanctions are only a small part of what can help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, an important factor is also the increase in Ukrainian production of military weapons.
We can't believe that everything will be solved by sanctions. Likewise, we need to develop our own capabilities, which is what we are doing, responding blow for blow. This is one of the ways, and sanctions are just an alternative to weapons, but not a replacement for weapons. That's why we can work on both fronts at the same time.
And now the segment, True Stories That Cannot Be Silenced. Our editorial team has obtained information about a certain major in the RAV army. We're talking about the deputy commander of the 2nd Unit for Logistics, the head of logistics support for Military Unit 11659, the 22nd Separate Guards Brigade, Major Igor Alexandrovich Gospodinka. So, since the occupation of the Zaporizhia region, Major Gospodinka, excuse my language, seized a private house in the village of Novolexevka, Berdyansk district. In addition, it is known that other personnel from this brigade, specifically a reconnaissance group, were stationed in this village. Gospodinka supplied them with food and fuel in accordance with his position. In this house, there was constant drinking, and not only that, they were actively distilling moonshine there, giving it to everyone, including all those from the brigade's higher command who came to inspect them. For example, in this footage, Colonel Galkin arrived for an inspection. They say it's useless to complain because when inspectors come for these kinds of checks, they just get drunk out of their minds.
Guys, it's not just your 12th tank unit where this kind of crap happens. This is how Colonel Galkin conducts inspections in the 22nd Brigade, Military Unit 11659. So much pride that by 8:28 they're already barely able to stand, and you say we should complain. For them, any complaint is just an excuse to come and drink. She gets thrown in the pit for that, and then there's an assault, while they get medals and promotions.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Defense Forces seem to be dealing with drunkenness among their leadership and army more effectively than those inspectors we've seen.
18 officers from the operational staff of the 35th Combined Arms Army were killed as a result of sabotage in the Zaporizhia region.
But even such tragic incidents don't seem to teach Russian soldiers anything.
They say that at 12 Perehudova Street in Novoalexevka, Berdyansk district, there are also some important big shots sitting around. One of them is in the photo. According to forecasts, there might be some hot grass there too, but that's not certain.
Well, what can I say, Great Toastmaster? The contests are very interesting. How do you like our news? Write to us about what we should change to become better, and we will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our next episodes. See you